Thank you all for coming. For those of you I haven't met yet, my name is David. I'm one of the co-founders of DataLane.
Hi, everybody. My name's Amanda. I help lead RevOps at Glass Genius.
And today we're going to be covering a topic that has become a bit of a recurring theme here at Vertex because it's one of the biggest challenges for vertical tech companies. And that's solving go-to-market for buyers who aren't on LinkedIn, who aren't sitting in an office all day responding to emails. And we're going to do that through the lens of Gloss Genius's transition from pure inbound focus to running a scaled outbound org as well. But before we jump into that, we should probably just give quick introductions to Gloss Genius and DataLane.
Awesome. So for those of you who do not know what Glass Genius is, we're an all-in-one platform doing booking, payments, etc. in the beauty and wellness space. And so we do 100 million in revenue. And then a bit of context of how fast we're growing. So when I joined the company 2 years ago, we had 2 sellers and 1 sales manager. As of this month, we're almost at 50 sellers and plans to 2x that once again by the end of the year.
Awesome. And quick context on DataLane, you can think about us as the go-to-market data layer for companies selling into local economy. So we work with many of the largest enterprises in these spaces, as well as some of the fastest growing vertical AI companies. And our ultimate goal is to accelerate revenue. So we do that through account scoring, campaigns, rep efficiency, and many other topics that we'll cover throughout this presentation. But my main goal in this talk is really to do 2 things. One, kind of moderate the fascinating case study that is Gloss Genius, and then also share context on how this generalizes to other verticals. Because while we're talking about beauty and wellness here, really the shape of the problem is the same, whether it's home services, restaurants, like any vertical, just the specific details change. So yeah, that's kind of the idea. But we also want to make sure this talk is as useful for everyone here as possible. I appreciate those of you who submitted questions in advance. I think there's 2 themes that came up in the questions that were submitted. One is this kind of debate between territory models versus named account lists. And then second area is vertical specific data points. We're going to try to cover both of those during the talk, but also we're going to save 10 minutes at the end for questions that folks have. I do want to pause just for a second, though. Is there any other topics or questions that people want to make sure we cover? Anything top of mind?
Just kind of largely, and I'm kind of curious on this, like, all the inbound stuff as well.
Mm.
It's like they're running a full inbound motion, watching this now as well. And what's some of that stuff looks like.
Cool. Yeah, it's going to be one of our first slides, and then also if you guys have specific questions, we'll save time at the end, too. So DataLane specifically, we're US focused for now, expanding internationally. We can certainly talk about kind of how to approach the data problems if you are international. Spoiler, it's hard is the answer, but we can go through that as well. Yeah.
One of the things like independent versus things that have more complex structure.
Hierarchies, yeah, we'll cover that too, and kind of the entity resolution portion of this. Yeah.
For SMB specifically, like, let's say you have the contact details, the next step, right? And they're like aversion to cold calling and all.
Yeah.
You know, how do you see, at least at the SMB level, how they make best use of that data once they get it?
I think that's a really good question. It actually tees up, like this is just the overview of what we're going to cover. I'll actually start with kind of a theoretical answer to that, which is the framework I find most useful for thinking about go-to-market for local, and it's simple. It's what accounts to work and how to work them, but it covers pretty much everything. So what accounts to work is, do you have visibility into your full TAM? Do you have account scoring, campaigns, all the stuff that kind of falls into that bucket? And then how to work them is kind of to your question. What channels are you using? Because if you have contact data, the simplest thing to do is kind of like inside sales, but you can also take that contact data and run custom audience performance marketing campaigns. There's a bunch of channels you could use for the same data sets. So I think about that how to work them segment as kind of channels, messages, and then rep efficiency, so you can do them as quickly as possible. But that gets very theoretical. We want to also ground this in kind of the reality of like, what did it look like when you went through the transition? So maybe Amanda, just to give us the high level overview of the 4 stages.
Yeah, so I really like the way that David has outlined it here. There are kind of chapters in our evolution from launching, going from inbound, starting our first iteration of what an outbound pilot looked like. setting really strong data foundations, and then using all of that to kind of scale our program to where it is today.
Awesome. And we just want to dive into the meat of the talk, and we're going to start focused on this inbound era. And I have a bunch of questions here. Maybe just so everyone has context, like where were these inbound leads coming from when you first started?
Yeah, so when I joined Glass Genius 2 years ago, our bread and butter was great performance marketing and word of mouth. And so we had a really strong user base, and people came to us based on reputation, and we had a lot of like paid success as well as organic growth. The inbound channel specifically, so we have on our marketing site an inbound sales demo form, and everybody who was submitting it was a decision maker. So the slide here says 100% decision maker, and what that means is, for example, I was looking at our inbound submissions the other day, and a question on the form is, how can we help you? An example that we had for a response is, hey, I'm using Square. I'm very unhappy with the constant fees for add-on features. I need a platform that supports payroll, time tracking, booking, payments, etc. So that's your quintessential decision maker. They know the problem, they know the gaps, and they're actively looking for a solution.
I think that's really helpful because we're going to contrast that to what it was like when you went to outbound. But this begs the question of, as someone who spends a lot of time working with teams doing outbound, this seems pretty magical and pretty ideal. And why would you actually want to change anything? What caused the decision to go outbound?
Yeah, so we were having a lot of success with inbound. I think the main thing here is that when Glass Genius started, our bread and butter was solo entrepreneurs. And so organically, when we started to move to a team spaces or upmarket, we were hitting kind of the smaller teams. So teams with employee counts of 2, 3, 4. And so inherently, those are lower ACV accounts. And for lower ACV accounts, you have to supplement it with higher volume. And so at some point, it kind of plateaus. And so I would say that's the reason we decided to look into other channels. It was more of a strategic lever.
And I think this is very common, like probably many people in this room as well. The specific initiative changes, sometimes it's go up market, sometimes it's new vertical, sometimes it's launching a new product. But that change has a corresponding like go-to-market strategy change as well. And then what we want to talk through is kind of what happens as you start making that transition. So before we dive into outbound, I think a natural question is, why not just scale up performance marketing and focus it more on upmarket accounts?
Yeah, so with performance marketing, we did kind of have these upmarket campaigns on Meta, for example. What we found was that when we increased the spend for performance marketing, we actually had trouble with cost efficiency. And so this is illustrative, but we were spending $50K, let's say, on Meta ad spend per month, and our sales demo cost was like $100 per sales demo. We wanted to increase volume there, and so we increased ad spend. And what we found was, for example, 4xing Meta ad spend to $200K per month was not actually yielding 4x the volume coming in through that channel, and it was skyrocketing CAC. And so
was it close to like 4x on the CAC as well?
Yeah, so it was like we 4x Meta spend and then 4x to almost $400 per sales demo, which was just not sustainable. So the highlight here is that cost efficiency was, for us, a very trickier metric to try to control in performance marketing for upmarket campaigns.
Yeah, and we hear this with outbound, like controlling destiny. We're not actually pitching outbound here. It's just like one of many channels, because something you'll hear later on is you guys have brought back performance marketing to complement some of the upmarket outbound campaigns. But it's a matter of like testing these different channels and seeing what works for your specific motion. You guys landed on outbound as kind of the next test, and I'm curious how you thought about setting up the first few pilots when you started outbound.
Yeah, so this is a completely new motion for us entirely. And so the way that we set it up is we had a more, pilot team of 2 sales reps who were originally inbound, but testing into like the outbound territory. And so we had a team of 2 reps, and we kept the criteria quite broad. And so we were testing into all of the competitors and verticals that were on our standard inbound demo form. And we were specifically looking for teams where their employee count was 2 to 10. So very broad criteria.
Yeah. And this is the fun part. What kind of happened when you started running those first tests? Like, what went wrong?
Yeah, so I think I heard somebody in the audience say people who don't want to talk to you. And so that's the number one thing that changed between outbound and inbound. We were hitting gatekeepers. And so we were calling into businesses, trying to pitch them on Glass Genius, and we'd hit a receptionist or a general member of the staff, no one with decision-making power. And it was a lot from a motion standpoint and also from a change management perspective, equipping the sellers of how to adjust their talk tracks for these new types of audiences.
And just want to like drill into that because this is something that comes up constantly in questions. Like, an interesting point is that if you are going to the micro SMB segment, you actually don't need decision maker contact info mobile numbers for many industries. So this is true in home services. If it's a landscaper, it's just a guy in a truck, the number on Google Maps is his number. You don't, it's not hard to reach them, whether it's inbound or outbound. This changes as you go up market. It also is vertical specific. In restaurants, there's almost always a gatekeeper. Knowing this is very important. People will come to me and say, I want to enrich 1 million leads, like 1 million accounts with contact data. It's very expensive. It's also, your sales team's not going to work them. And then on top of that, you don't even need the mobile numbers for half of your audience. So I think this is a really important lesson. It's true once you go up market, then you very much do need it. But in many scenarios, you don't actually need that information. Mm-hmm. And then what was the second point here?
Yeah, so originally we had all these decision makers and they were in our ICP because our ICP was finding us, they were landing on our marketing page. And so another challenging thing is now we have non-ICP expansion. And so I said that we started really broad with our criteria. We were going into all these different team sizes, competitors, and verticals. And so for our sellers, it was a lot of different talk tracks to try to remember. How do I pitch Gloss Genius for a med spa using Square versus someone who's hair and using Vigaro? There are all these different permutations of talk tracks that they could have as we went outbound. And so what we found is we needed to get more targeted with the accounts that we were seeking in an outbound motion to get more specific with the training, with the end product being equipping our sellers and building their confidence so they knew how to pitch Gloss Genius for very specific segments that we were going into.
Totally makes sense. And I think this is actually a really good lesson for people who are thinking about doing this outbound transition is we hadn't even started working together at this point. I think we came in just after this, but it's really helpful that you had run these pilot tests because these are the real problems they hit. And then you know what problems you actually need to solve versus kind of like proactively thinking through everything that you could potentially solve. At least those are the problems on the sales side. I'm curious, like what were you experiencing on the RevOps side when you made this transition to outbound?
Yeah, so before we signed up for Data Lane, we were working with an agency who was providing us third-party information on these accounts that we should go into. And they were providing it to us in CSVs. And so I'm not sure if any of you guys work in RevOps, but I was managing like 100,000 rows of CSVs and trying to do these data transformations on it, and my MacBook would just continuously crash. It was just not sustainable for me to work with such high volume to support an outbound motion in CSVs. It was just, from a RevOps perspective, my team and I, it was incredibly painful for a number of months.
Yeah, I've seen those CSVs and definitely had the laptop crashing as well. And people kind of make the transition. You can use the intermediate steps like row zero, but ultimately you end up at a data warehouse architecture. We could go into it later in questions like how do you set up the ETL pipelines, reverse ETLs to your CRM, your data warehouse when you're dealing with the scale that is often present for local businesses. Like I think the Gloss Genius TAM is over a million locations. And then there's obviously like hundreds of data points for every single location. So it really is just a giant scale, which you uncovered firsthand. So I think this is helpful in terms of some of the challenges. And it sounds like one of the pieces that was just missing was the data foundation. And maybe a question for you is like, we've talked about it in abstract, but what type of data points were you focused on?
Yeah, so there's like a short list of things that need to be accurate and correct. And so on that short list is the decision maker contact information. So phone, email, website. And then for our business, for where we wanted to go after, team size is really important, competitor, and vertical.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. And then once you had that information, what did it actually enable you to do? Like what came out of that?
Yeah, so from this data, I like to think about it in a two-pronged approach. And so really data integrity and data hygiene set the foundation for us to do things in the immediate term, which was defining our ICP, building territories, and generating pipelines. So that was something we needed to do first week, first month, first half to kind of sustain our revenue goals. And then I would say on the flip side, understanding what was in the TAM was really helpful for business strategic goals in the long term. So 1 year, 3 years, 5 years, these strategic objectives were less so generating pipeline today and more so how do we expand into non-ICP and what's our runway sizing per segment in the long term?
And I think this is actually underrated. It's not usually the reason people get started on these projects. It's for the immediate needs. But almost every time I've run one of these projects, there's like strategic implications that come out, whether it's hiring plans, new verticals focused, new products. Was there anything in particular that you guys changed as a result of like the strategic learnings?
Yeah, so I'd say from a business perspective, we wanted to move up market and across different verticals. So an example, moving up market, larger teams, multi-location, etc., and across verticals, med spa is a good example. And so I would say our product is still catching up to be viable in those different segments. And so it's hard to deploy full-scale ramped solutions for an entire sales team of 50 people as the product's catching up. And so what this enabled us to do is build these pods of specialty account executives. And so we could move faster, be agile, iterate, and test with these new pods.
That makes sense. And this question, like obviously many people here are vertical focused, so this becomes like as you go across verticals, but many of the horizontal companies in the space are asking this question too of when do we verticalize the team? I think some of the change management issues make it obvious that you should do it then. You also tend to get better performance, but it is more complexity to manage these vertical go-to-market teams. Cool. So entity resolution is a big word. I'm curious kind of what it means to you, Amanda.
Yeah, that's a fancy way of saying who is who. I think if you work in SMB and with local data, this is a very complicated question to answer. I think in our industry specifically, there is not a unique data point that can serve as a unique identifier for accounts in beauty and wellness that are generally brick and mortar. And so I think a lot of more traditional enterprise B2B SaaS have something like a LinkedIn, domain, phone, email that can differentiate account from account. But in our business, we don't necessarily have that luxury.
And it's even worse than it first sounds. Like I think Gloss Genius is a great example of this, where so many local businesses will use a third party as their website. So people use Gloss Genius, they'll use ToastTab, they'll use Facebook as their website, which just breaks the whole entity resolution piece.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So Gloss Genius is in the business of creating booking websites for their clients, and so it's not necessarily realistic to expect someone who's looking for a website builder to provide a website to you in their demo form.
Exactly. And then this gets even more complicated with the question someone was asking around hierarchies, because in many verticals you get into franchise holding groups. How do you map those across? And home services, there's the private equity roll-ups, which is like a really complex landscape to map as well. So not only do you have to have an entity resolution algorithm that works with the individual locations, then you have to roll it up into the right accounts, because if you don't, you run into all these issues when you're doing kind of a multi-channel go-to-market approach where someone will be working an inbound lead, simultaneously working the outbound lead. We've worked with giant public companies where their sales reps are accidentally cold calling existing customers. This still happens at scale because it is a very hard problem to solve.
Yeah, and I'll jump in there. If you guys were close to sales, I think the ability to dedupe is extra important because it pertains to deal ownership. And so you need to pay out and commission your sellers. And when there's ownership issues, it becomes a very big mess to deal with. And that's why the upstream data integrity is so critical to scaling as sales motion.
Totally agree. Okay, so we talked through TAM visibility, we talked through the entity resolution piece. How did that kind of set you up for building your first scoring algorithms?
Yeah, so I'm really excited to talk about this. It's also a two-pronged approach where it's kind of your classic top-down approach for scoring. And so this is your classic, I have a hypothesis and I'm going to test into it. We have a performance marketing team who has assumptions on our win rates for different combinations of verticals and competitors. And so classic, we have a hypothesis, we're going to put our sellers on this and see how it performs. That's top down. The creative thing I think that we're doing right now is more of a bottoms up approach. And so with the unlock of having TAM data, we can combine it with our internal company historical data and feed it into these ML models. And so in collaboration with our data science team, we're able to generate these two scoring models. The first one is account scoring. So prediction of the revenue opportunity of an account in the market. And the second model is a lead score model, which is likelihood to convert. So something we're constantly talking about at the leadership level at Gloss Genius is when the opportunity in the TAM is larger than the capacity of your sales team, it's fundamentally important for you to weed out the noise and get really efficient because you can't tackle everything at the same time.
Yeah, and I think this bottoms up approach is really powerful. People are just starting to roll it out across the industry. There's this nice thing in local where you have large enough TAM to actually make these ML models meaningful. I used to build some of these algorithms for the ads orgs at Facebook before, but it's a very similar idea where um, you basically you do entity resolution on first party and third party data, then you separate your first party data into two cohorts, so like a good cohort and a bad cohort. Then you have to pull a set of features for the leads in those two cohorts, and then you run these random forest models, other models to derive correlations on the features for what are the best performing accounts. And some of them just match the hypotheses from top-down approach, which is great. That like validates that you never know how good the gut assumption is going to be that comes from the top-down approach, but it validates like what is backed up in data as well. And then there's always new surprising insights too for what kind of comes out of these bottom-up models. And I think you were alluding to it, but kind of the general framework we see is that you basically just break it into two buckets: the lifetime value of the customer, so like the value of the account, and then how likely is it to convert is the second area. And you can break that down further into like signals and triggers on the account in terms of is now a good time to reach out, but then you also have to look at the reachability of the account. So sometimes there's just 3 different scores that you're mapping, and in our experience it's best to do those individually and then like multiply them at the end or add them at the end to get to an account scoring model. And maybe just to make it real with like a specific example outside this industry, so we spend a lot of time in the brick and mortar retail space with POS companies that are very focused on this, and it kind of ends up overlapping product strategy. So some of the retail POSs are very focused on inventory management, and they want to track specific third-party data points like how many SKUs does this business have, how many items out of stock, how many items on sale, and it's really important to have those features because those are the features that turned out to be very predictive in where they would win versus competitors, but those aren't in your standard TAM data set. So it's just like one word of caution when building this, like getting the feature set is very important as well in order to make sure you have features that are actually predictive of accounts that are more likely to convert. And then you're basically just building lookalikes on your best performing accounts.
Yeah, and I'll give one example to maybe demonstrate what this looks like tangibly. In the tops-down approach, we used to disqualify solo entrepreneurs on the assumption that it was a proxy for ACV, and smaller accounts and solos were not high ACV enough to make assigning a seller worth it. When we transitioned to this bottoms-up approach and we were feeding these ML models, and there were thousands of data points, we could begin to ask ourselves this question: is a high ACV solo worth pursuing more so than a low ACV team? And that's the sophistication that we've unlocked by having this top-down and bottoms-up approach in tandem.
Yeah, I think it's awesome because it's not even bad to have the simplistic heuristic at the beginning, but then to layer it on when the solopreneurs or single location restaurants are 80% of the TAM often, you really want to be able to capture the good 10% because it just doubles your serviceable market. Okay, now we get to another fun part. So like once you have all these data foundations set up, what type of campaigns and ideas has that unlocked?
Yeah, so in the beginning, I was saying that Gloss Genius was really good with word of mouth. And so our sales team had been telling us for months, quarters, that, hey, I think it's a really cool idea if we say you should get onto Gloss Genius because your neighbors are using it. I know it's common with like brick and mortar businesses where there's density as well. And so now that we have the TAM data set, I was able to kind of self-serve and build this script using an Anthropic API key, cross-referencing the addresses of the TAM data set with the addresses of our existing customers. And we're able to run this script and provide these personalized snippets to AEs saying, hey, I see that you're located on this cross street in New York. Did you know 1 block away and 2 blocks away, there are active Gloss Genius businesses that are similar to what your account is going after as well. And so we launched this in the beginning of Q2, and originally, initially we have had pretty positive feedback from our sellers saying it's a way to really enable this local and social proof angle.
Yeah, and this is something that like JV at Toast is also very bullish on, like with the reps in a specific zip code. I think one important thing is like individual campaigns like this aren't going to fix outbound, and yeah, we'll get to a question shortly here. It's But once you have the data foundations, you're able to iterate on a whole bunch of campaigns like this, and that's the important thing. Like it didn't actually take you that long to roll out this campaign, and that's really important because you can just test and learn.
What do your customers think of you going and saying, hey, this guy is using our software, he's your neighbor, you should use it? Is it not like revealing their secret sauce?
For our existing customers?
Yeah, do they like you doing that?
So it's all the stuff that's publicly available, and so it's things like they advertise their website on their Google Maps location. Like we said, a lot of our customers are using their websites at our Gloss Genius as the websites for marketing reasons. And so if you look up Gloss Genius on Google Maps, like all Gloss Genius websites show up. And so this is data that, you know, if you're a beauty website, you're promoting your business.
Cool. So we've talked about a lot of the challenges that you experience as you go through each phase of these iterations, which everyone does. Like it's not just the initial pilots. Even once you get the data foundations in place, many people want to take their foot off the gas at that point. But the delta between where you're going to be at month 1 versus where you're going to be at month 6 is always very large. I've never seen anyone just roll out in month 1 and have it be extremely effective. So having the right metrics in place is very important for actually doing that. And I'm kind of curious, what metrics did you set up to evaluate this?
Yeah, so when we were launching Outbound, there's a bunch of different iterations that are happening, which unfortunately means that things that you've set up in your funnel are constantly changing in terms of definitions. Something that's pretty hardline at the company is the term activations, and so those are paid subscribers on our platform. And so from a metrics perspective, everything was kind of backwards planned from there. And so we have an idea from our revenue targets and our financial plan of how many activations we needed in a month, in a quarter. And from there, we could use conversion rates to figure out what is the win rate we need, how many demos booked do we need, how many decision maker connects, and how many people from our TAM we needed to feed into the books of business of our sellers.
And what did you find kind of in terms of how the funnel would change for different channels, for inbound versus outbound?
Yeah, so with diversifying the channels, we had inbound, we had marketing leads, we had cold outbound. And the interesting thing that we found is once we got people to that third stage, demos booked, a lot of the conversion rates started to normalize. And so from the outbound perspective, is really key for us to try to optimize on how many accounts we could get to demos booked, because from there, with the normalizing conversion rates, we were bullish that we could make the end numbers work.
And this is important for the scoring models. If you're building the bottoms up model, you need as large of a sample as possible, since you're often going to do that positive negative cohort on demos booked. So if you have a similar post demo funnel, then you're able to use that as kind of the signal for these models. One other thing that I want to call out here is the definitions are really important. I was always confused in the beginning when one customer would come say we have a 5% DM connect rate, the next customer would say we have a 50% DM connect rate. The answer is just everyone's definition is different. Some of it's semantics, but I think it actually does matter, and I'll give kind of 2 reasons why. At a bare minimum, you need the definitions to be consistent over time. Otherwise, the historical data and analysis just isn't going to work. It's also really helpful to have them consistent across the industry, because when you're looking at this funnel and trying to see where the biggest gap is, yes, you can compare historically, but it's also really helpful to just compare versus industry benchmarks. If your DM connect rate is, I'll make it up, 12%, that's right in the sweet spot of best in class. If you spend a lot of projects trying to improve that specifically, it's not high leverage. You should be focused on other areas. So I think getting these definitions consistent is very important as well. Okay, so we talked through a lot of the tech and kind of the theoretical, as we alluded to at the beginning. None of this matters if you don't get the change management right as well. So what did you see on that side as you rolled out Outbound?
Yeah, so this brings us to the final chapter, our current chapter in the evolution of our outbound motion. And so I think with the rapid change in technology and AI, what we're finding is that the technology is moving at a very rapid pace, and it's sometimes hard for our sales team to ramp and scale at that exact same pace. And so I'll use marketing as an example. We have all these different marketing channels now: trade shows, webinars, gated content, direct mail, email. And the velocity in which we can generate content, especially with AI, is so rapid these days. It's hard for sellers who are human to catch up and stay on pace. And so I'd say one of the biggest challenges and interesting problems that we're solving right now is how to equip sellers with the tools and the skill sets to keep up with how fast we're generating content and running tens and tens of campaigns concurrently.
And I'll just say, you won't get any value from the the RevOps initiatives if you don't do the change management piece. Like something I've talked about a lot with Kyle Norton at Owner is rep efficiency. Like one of the projects that people always suggest when they're like analyzing their funnel is, what if our reps didn't do as much research and just called more? Like how would that affect things? Really great in theory. Almost every time it rolls out, it works during the pilot. You get the right data into the CRM, you get the right data into the engagement tool. If you're sitting next to the reps, you can get them to call more, you get more volume through. Then you roll it out across the company and you don't see any change. And the reason is that when you actually look at the reps, they just go back to doing the manual research. They have the data in the CRM, they have the data in outreach, but they're still doing the manual research themselves. And you have to do a ton of change management to get them to, because you've proven empirically that if you have the right data, it doesn't actually increase conversion. If it increases conversion, great, let them keep doing the research. But when it doesn't, you have to like really double down on the change management to actually get the value from the initiative. Oh, okay, awesome. So like just to recap everything we covered, I think it starts usually with a strategic initiative or something you're trying to change in the business. And then you need to map the correct go-to-market motion to that. Then you start testing and learning, different problems come out. Almost always you need to get the data foundations in place if you're operating at any scale. But data foundations alone aren't going to be enough. You're going to have to pair it with kind of the change management too. So we wanted to make sure we leave kind of 10 minutes here for questions, but appreciate you all joining us. And thank you, Amanda, for sharing the story.
Yeah, thank you.
Awesome. Questions?
Yeah. Question for one of you guys. I guess Amanda, did you consider? It sounded like you organized your AEs by vertical, I think. Did you consider organizing them by some other criteria, and then data that you've done need work with teams to figure out how companies should best organize their AEs?
Do you have SMB and upmarket as well as vertical specific?
So to start with what I was originally going to say, so I know a lot of sales team do geographic territories. And so the whole theme here is we iterated on so many different things and found out a lot of things didn't work. So when we originally did this, we actually did geographical territories, east versus west, and found that there was no difference actually. Our Gloss Genius businesses are all over the country. Our sales reps are actually all over the country as well. And so what we found was the geographical segmentation was actually not that important. We're leaning more towards vertical specialization. Yeah.
And the only thing I'll add is we still see like an SMB versus mid-market versus enterprise split for many scaled teams, and then like verticalization sometimes like within each of these like 3 teams, or only for specific teams. Like we only verticalize for mid-market and enterprise.
Do you think, like, you're doing a good job that we have all this great data on all of our prospects? Like, it seems, I don't want to say, if it works, but do you think this might be antiquated? We should be organizing around some new type of engagement data or insights.
Oh, I see what you're getting at. So like I would say like once you score accounts, then campaigns is kind of like the ordering of how you execute across the accounts, and that's really important for the change management. Like we've talked a lot about context switching on the reps, and you really want them to be running a campaign where they're saying the same script for this week, and like if the TAM is large enough, that is, I don't think I've never seen the go-to-market org actually organized like that, but I very much have seen the plays and campaigns structured in that way.
I'll just add a point on that. So your talk track as a seller is actually not that different if you're selling into a hair salon in Pennsylvania versus Wisconsin, right? But it does matter quite a bit if you're selling into a hair salon versus a med spa. So for us specifically, having those refined talk tracks by vertical was substantially more important. For a company that's not doing field sales, for territories were not as important.
Both go, but one at a time.
Thank you for. I was wondering, so it's been to say holiday. You mentioned that you need like very high specialization for sales reps, and I was wondering like what do you actually handle when you want to release like new products, especially for the retail? Like how do you actually set up like your sales team for that? Do you like
Yeah, so essentially, like, as you're testing new verticals, like, where are you pulling the sellers who are experienced in those verticals, or like, how are you getting good sellers for those tests?
Yeah, so what I would say is very interesting. So we've actually redone our sales pitch recently where it's not product focus or featured focus and it's values focus. So I think when you try to sell products or sell features within your product and you over index on, oh, this feature or you specialize in this feature, you're kind of missing the narrative, which is that the business owner actually doesn't care about the features. They care about the value that it brings to their business. And so I think in that way, we're not specializing as granularity by features and thinking about that long tail. It's more holistically with the sellers trying to figure out how do you ask the right questions, how do you really tap into discovery to figure out what are the pain points for those accounts and how our product can help remediate those.
Yeah, and I also think it's just a tiger team of usually the top performing reps that end up going and testing that. Yeah.
I guess like a two-part question. One, um, as you guys look through coverage, does it have all impact to businesses, for example, importers, exporters, sub-defense contractors,
No.
things like that? And then second is, both of you reaching out to these type of businesses, what's the most effective channel? Like when you're doing tech companies, it's easy to reach out to them and they respond. Or like in this case, it's phone or in-person visits or what's the most effective way to get them in?
Yeah. I think maybe the generalization that's useful for folks is that it's very important to get data for your vertical, and you should honestly talk to someone who understands your vertical. Like, we don't do defense subcontractors, so I would just tell you that like up front and say we're probably not the right fit. But they're like the value, like people always say like AI, like where are you actually getting value? It used to be impossible to get the specific features that you need to run very targeted campaigns to build these scoring models. So I think it's just like we could talk offline about what I'd recommend for those specific verticals, but I just say the macro point is like the general answer is wrong. Like, you should be skeptical when anyone tells you like, oh, I have the employee count for every small business in the U.S. Like, I don't think that they do. That's true for revenue, and like the correct way to do revenue is the way Gloss Genius did, where and like Owner did this on eGMV, and other companies have as well, where you are essentially taking proxies, you're building a model to predict something, and then you're testing it on an ongoing basis where you've predicted what it's going to be, and then as customers sign up, you see what your prediction was, and then you're balancing precision recall, because you'd actually rather allow a few bad ones through than cut half of the TAM. It's like this nuanced question, but that's kind of my recommendation there.
And I would say it's more a question of and not or these days with AI. The buzzy word right now is account-based marketing, and so we hit them with this surround sound, right? So a direct mail campaign, performance marketing, email campaigns, all at the same time. I think with the way technology is moving with data, we just have new levers to pull and like doing all of these things concurrently versus picking one or the other.
And that didn't happen in SMB. Like, I think like last year, like pretty much no one was doing like true surround sound on the exact same accounts that their like outbound team was working. And I think it's just starting now with custom audiences and performance marketing, direct mail campaigns. The goal is just to set the infrastructure up where it's really easy to roll all these out, and also the metrics and tracking so you can see is it actually making an impact. The first part, I would say. Like, they're both super important. It's just a lot of that's on like sales coaching, training, etc. I would just treat them as two separate parts. The only piece I'll quickly add before I let you jump in there is there's a lot of like, especially for larger companies, post-sale opportunities around like upsell, cross-sell, where you're still trying to find. We work with DoorDash on this for ads. Like, you have existing businesses, who are the right ones that are considering advertising, so you can reach them at the right time. That's the one like post-sale, like, or an example post-sale use case.
Yeah, so I would say for like a hyper-growth company like Gloss Genius, top of funnel is always going to be the most impactful. There was a slide that David had presented with our funnel, and we had said that once we get them into demos booked, a lot of the conversion normalizes. It's just that barrier of getting them to demos booked is such an uphill climb for outbound. It's really what we're trying to get right as our main focus right now.
How to make your sales reps ask the right questions to identify the problem? Like if somebody is using Apathy or MindBody in your case, how to make it as a process that they ask the right questions to focus on the value and not features. Like as a founder, you have a lot of context, you can do that, but how to train it and build it as a process to make them ask the right questions.
Yeah, I think right now there's so much data to sift through, and so we use Gong as most sales organizations use, and so instead of kind of relying on managers to have these one-on-ones with sellers and say, hey, what's working, we can actually just sift through so many of these transcripts and this call data to figure out from a numbers perspective what openers are people using and what lasts to metrics like longer call duration, downstream, down funnel conversion, etc. And so I'd say kind of being open to testing a lot of things, but having a really quick iteration and feedback cycle to figure out, all right, works. We're going to zone in and target this. I feel like is just the general approach that has been working for us.
But is it more feedback based or is it like something initially can be given to them?
I think when we're running a pilot, it's kind of open, and then within like a week or 2 weeks, we come back and say, like, here is the proposal, their suggestion or recommendation that we have on our side. And then we'll do things like generate notes or openers and put them into the CRM so they have it at their disposal as they're making these outbound calls.
Cool. And we'll do one or two more questions, and then we'll hang out after if anyone has more questions.
In terms of hiring sales rep, as a vertical SaaS, is it better to go with someone who has like software sales experience and then teach them, beauty salons, or is it better to get someone that isn't a beauty salon and teach them sales and software sales? So which archetype of a sales persona hire does better, at least in your experience?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we're hiring really quickly, and I'd say the philosophy that we're taking is high slope people who are hungry. I think tech moves so quickly, and so the technology from a month ago, 2 months ago, 3 months ago is so different than today. You really want to have someone who has the appetite and adaptability to kind of keep up with that pace. And so I'd say definitely optimizing on hungry, work ethic is something that we value more than industry knowledge or expertise.
Yeah, I think it's also just going to change based on what channels you're focused on and what size of companies you're focused on. If it's a very relationship-based sale, totally makes sense. If it's a high-velocity sale where you think you can give them the knowledge in a relatively condensed amount of time, it makes sense to hire for slow. Last question? Yeah?
You mentioned a lot cost control, all the strategies going down, what do you have like a few tips on what should people to deploy to actually reduce costs and processing?
So the question was like what tips on how to reduce costs as you're deploying all these different strategies. Is that correct? Yeah, I would say this is really top of mind for my team, especially. And so I'd say these scoring models was something that, took a lot of time to build, but we're really trying to tap into because the scoring models, once they're developed, are no additional cost to the company, but it allows us to refine if we're launching a campaign for direct mail or email or performance marketing, what that exact segment is. So we're not casting this really wide net. And if we, target someone, it's a bit more refined in terms of who we're going after.
Yeah, and one last thing I'll add is that if you're thinking about running like LLMs at scale on these universes, there's just so many accounts and the cost very quickly adds up. It just has to be a multi-phase approach. Like you're going to use determinate. That's why it's really useful to have the TAM database with dozens of columns. It's not going to have all the columns you need, but you want to filter down to the subset that you're focused on and then run LLMs on that subset. Otherwise, the cost is just going to be massive.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So we can't run these LLM scripts on the entire data set of 1.1 million accounts. It's just simply too costly. But having something like account scoring, we could say, we're going to take our top decile and run the LLM script on the top decile. It is a way to break up the cost that is more, ROI positive for the company.
Awesome. We're at 45 minutes, but thanks everyone.